New second thought, do we really live under capitalism? Now, this is an interesting one because to me, the answer is yes. Like, what else could we live under? How could he take this, right? Like neo-feudalism, techno-feudalism? I don't know. That would be the closest I would go in terms of like trying to come up with an answer here, like as to what else this could be other than a completely broken exploitative version of late stage capitalism. Because we're definitely not living under socialism. Now the question is, do we live under a free market? And the answer is no. Thank Jesus Christ. We still live under a form of capitalism, a form of economics where we produce commodities for the sake of profit. Now that is capitalism, whether it's regulated or not. Now we don't live under a free market, but yeah, we literally live under communism because the government is doing stuff still. Oh no, Taco, are you a reactionary conservative now? Do we really live under capitalism? Let's see.
Better yet, it's crony capitalism.
This is something I see a lot too, crony capitalism.
Or actually, it's the very trendy techno-feudalism.
That's what I said! Yeah, that's another thing I've heard. Techno-feudalism, some kind of modern feudalism. That's another one I hear.
Real capitalism is basically perfect, so if anything is wrong, it's probably because of something else with a different name.
Maybe we do live under something for a different name. I would not say that makes capitalism perfect. Obviously not.
In this video, I'm going to be debunking that idea as thoroughly as I possibly can, because I'm pretty tired of getting these misguided comments. It's not corporatism.
Oh, okay. So the point is, the point of his video is, yes, we are actually living under capitalism. Okay, got it.
It's not crony capitalism, it's just plain old capitalism.
Okay, that's something I should have figured out in my intro for the video.
Corporatism is the wrong word. So crony capitalism it is.
So corporatism, as we looked it up when we were talking that one time, is something completely different. When I heard it, and when I think people use that term, I would assume, they are saying, like, we live under an economy where corporations control everything. That's what they mean by corporatism. Now, that is not what corporatism is. It sounds like it's what it should be, but that's not what it is. So I think what people are saying there is we live under a system where corporations control everything. And that is mostly true, but that is not corporatism. You could probably argue that that is just an inevitable result of capitalism.
Crony capitalism, sometimes called cronyism, is an economic system in which businesses thrive not as a result of free enterprise, but rather as a return on money amassed through collusion between a business class and the political class.
Yes? I'm sure he will explain it well, but on the surface, that sounds like exactly what's happening. Every government on earth right now, has this going on. You have companies paying politicians for legislation that benefits those companies at the expense of their workers and the public. So to me, that sounds like what's going on. And if that's what crony capitalism is, that sounds right to me. With that said, again, it does sound like something that could be an inevitability of capitalism. So maybe crony capitalism is just a typical end state of capitalism. Whatever he just described there sounds to me like what is going on.
Capitalism, crony or not, is an economic system where a tiny, unelected minority of people get the vast majority of people to work for them so that they can get wealthier. You might think that's all right. I happen to think it's wrong.
I don't think that's all right. But I also don't think that is 100. I say this all the time. I don't think that is 100% an inevitability of capitalism without like severe regulation by a population of well-informed individuals who are willing to vote for those regulations. That is not what we have right now. But I think that those issues with most of the capital accumulating at the top can be regulated. Now the question is, can we achieve equity in that way? Possibly. Would it be easier to achieve equity using a different economic system? Probably. That's kind of where I'm at with this.
And libertarians are vague about the amount of state intervention they deem to be okay. And as a result, anytime something bad happens, it can just be chalked up to too much intervention, called crony capitalism, and they continue to clamor for small government.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay, that makes sense.
And that means capitalism will always inevitably be crony. Therefore, the distinction doesn't matter.
Okay. I will agree with him there. And that is kind of what I was saying. Like, when you look at that definition of crony capitalism, I think it's totally reasonable to argue that that could be an inevitability of capitalism, period. So, like, what's the point? What's the point of making a distinction? Again, I'm not convinced yet that you can't regulate this stuff away. Like, I'll put on my sockdem hat, that you can't effectively regulate the more, exploitative aspects of capitalism and create a more tame version that isn't exploitative. I'm just going to admit it. Like, I still haven't. Who's going to regulate it, though? You and me, the public. A well-informed public who are aware of the things going on around them that affect them and themselves and others. Who are going to vote and say, we can't let these things happen. We're going to trust scientific consensus. We're going to trust these experts who say we need to do this, this, and that. And then we vote to regulate. We say politician who gets in there who takes money from corporations, we're going to vote you out. We're going to vote to make your funding, who's funding you, more public, so we know what's going on. And if we sniff any corruption, we're going to get another guy in or gal. Well, if the public is going to regulate industry and such, why keep capitalism? It's like monarchy in Britain. Yeah, I sure. And I do talk about this where I'm like, you're already like publicly regulating so much. At one point, are you just not really doing capitalism anymore? Sure, I'm open to that. And isn't this something Marx talked about? That like capitalism would eventually break down on its own failures, and some form of socialism would arise from its ashes. I don't know. I am just talking out of my ass here, obviously. This is one place where I'm not an economist at all. So I can mostly keep it vague to say, and in the world we live in, you can keep things vague. You can keep things nuanced. You can keep things without nuance is my point when you're at this point, because the question is, when the question is, should people have an inherent right to healthcare or housing or an education? There's no nuance there. The answer is just yes. So we need to tax until we at least get that. Tax and regulate until we at least get those basic things. And then we can have conversations on what needs to happen next. Yes, we have a dictatorship of the proletariat set up, and then we regulate capitalism till it's gone. So the dictatorship of the proletariat, that is a Marxist term referring to the proletariat controlling everything in a sort of direct democracy way. The dictatorship of the proletariat is the intermediate stage between a capitalist economy and a communist economy, whereby the post-revolutionary state seizes the means of production, compels the implementation of direct elections on behalf of and within the confines of the ruling proletarian state party, and instituting elected delegates into representative workers' councils that nationalize ownership of the means of production from private to collective ownership. So, yeah, kind of what I was talking about, right? Wage earners control state power. And Marx viewed this as an intermediate step. If people are open to it, yeah, you can have the revolution tonight. I just don't think enough people are open to it to have the revolution. You could never have a socialist revolution in America today because there aren't enough socialists relative to non-socialists. You know what I mean? And so I don't think people are just going to wake up and a light bulb switches on and everyone's just going to realize socialism is the answer. I think it's going to be a slower process than that, personally. Which is why I'm open to it being more incremental. I think it can technically be regulated away, at least when it comes to, the United States. I can't speak for other countries. And this is something that was interesting about his social democracy video. that, convinces me that probably capitalism isn't the long-term answer is when it comes to third world exploitation. Like we can achieve, I truly think today we could achieve a perfect system of social democracy in the US where workers aren't exploited, where we provide people with certain necessary benefits and everyone gets paid well. But because we live under a global capitalist system, that will still require significant amount of exploitation, in the global south. And I'm open to that being required. The idea that, maybe you can fix exploitative capitalism, at home, but the idea that if you're going to have capitalism, period, someone somewhere will still need to be exploited, I'm open to that for sure, and that is probably the case.
Capitalism isn't a neutral economic system. It always ultimately favors those who sit at its helm. So when that means screwing over the vast majority of people, that is always the direction it will go.
Probably. Okay. Maybe I haven't read enough theory, and I say this all the time. I'm gonna say probably. But to I don't want to be an absolutist and say, absolutely true. Because I think we can achieve a lot of good thing through regulation. But probably capitalism will always lead to exploitation. Most likely.
As one final analogy, and this is how I usually explain it to commenters, you wouldn't call stage 4 cancer a different disease than cancer. It's simply the progression of the same disease.
Okay.
No matter what perverse, mutated versions of capitalism appear, if the economic base remains the same, if the profit motive is still the driving force, we live under capitalism.
Yeah.
You can call it what you want, but that won't change reality, nor will it solve the problem. The problem is capitalism.
Very good points. The problem is the profit motive. My son could... My son could probably not shit his diaper, but he's literally designed to shit. Okay. Sure. I can't argue against that. Everything aside, everything I've said aside, playing devil's advocate for capitalism, which I feel gross even saying out loud, because it is clear capitalism is a bad thing we need to move away from. With everything I set aside, I do accept vehemently that the profit motive, unquestionably, like you zoom out all the way or zoom in all the way, you look at the nucleus of what we're dealing with, what we're trying to fight, the profit motive